Good morning, everybody. It is May 20th, and the year is 2019. The time as I begin this broadcast is 9:26 a.m., and it should be going through all of the various gates to get to the various locations that it needs to arrive at so that you can begin to watch the broadcast in its entirety over there on the 15 Minutes of Flame site. A good morning to you all over on the YouTube site. Just going to throw in a little good morning over there as we get into the spirit of Monday with the Jupiter Neptune, Jupiter Moon conjunction square Neptune. So I think we should be getting synced up here pretty soon. It takes a few minutes for it to happen. I know over on the 15-minute side it's happening. Good morning, Steve and Chris. Looks like we've got action over on the YouTube side. They're way behind. They're going to see me staring off into space for a few minutes, and I'm not MK Ultra controlled. I can guarantee you that. So what's happening, everybody? What's going on? It is Monday, and we're coming into another week together. Another period and phase of mutually agreed upon productivity, because usually that's what Mondays are about, right? What is this over here? What is that? It's a little better. Yeah, video killed a radio star. No, not that I was ever a radio star. I really wasn't. But I did do pretty well on Blog Talk Radio. I had a pretty nice little show, pretty nice little run there. And then, of course, the demand and clamor for the YouTube experience, where people like watching things, got my attention. What's really interesting about, because I was doing a lot of blog talk over to YouTube, I was getting, I don't know, wasn't getting a lot of traction. YouTube apparently recognized video as an algorithm first. However, I do see people that have videos that are just straight audio. They do pretty well. You get 1,500, 2,000 views. So, I basically went in this direction, doing more video than straight audio, because I felt like, well, I was told that YouTube responds better to video. Anyway, welcome to Monday, and there's a lot happening on certainly on the personal choice front, some of which I got into on last night's Astro Livestream. If you didn't catch the show, it's a good show. I got into this really interesting synastry between Jordan Peterson and Brother 12, who shared some very unique astrological aspects together, and also unique physical attributes that they share. They look like each other. Anyway, if you enjoy that sort of thing, go on over there. I talk a fair amount about my kind of astrological take on abortion, some of which was infused with my own personal ideology. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that today. I feel like the pendulum, here's my stance, I feel like the pendulum has swung too far. Like we just swung way too far to this kind of reductivist sort of scientific side of things, where everything is just pure biology, nothing more, and it doesn't really matter. And I think that that's patently false. And I think that there needs to be some balance. There needs to be some real rebalancing, and I think that that's what's taking place. That's my opinion. Sometimes the rebalancing is quite severe in its manifestations, and people may not like it. Specifically, women may not like it. But in my estimation, how do we address this balance? Because nobody's going to sit down and go through the public school system, which seems to be going in the opposite direction, teaching your kids about dildos and cosplay and soft S&M and how to achieve ejaculatory or climactic states. I mean, this is where the schools are. That's what they're invested. They're not invested in the philosophical, the moral, the spiritual, the dimensions that center around love. There's no investment in there. So we can't expect the schools to readdress this balance. It ain't happening. Unless you watch the Hallmark Channel, which even that might have its own sorts of predications and guidelines around these sorts of things. That ain't going to happen. So then it comes up to laws redressing this, which is really the last resort. And nobody really likes law. I mean, some people like laws. Some people love laws. Some people love to be enslaved by laws. I'm not one of them. But sometimes it's the last resort. Now we have to abide by these so-called laws of the land, which are not the laws of God, the Creator, right? The Most High, this spiritualizing force in every single atom of our being, including the known created world, right? And the entire universe. There are those laws, and apparently we're kind of tone deaf to them as well. So I feel like that we've just negated the sacred part and the commitment part. Like there was a story not long ago where there was this young girl who was in college and she was pregnant, and she got some Uber guy to try to take her to an abortion clinic. And as she was telling him her story, he had this moment of conscience, and he said, "I can't take you. I can't deliver you to that." And he dropped her off at a gas station. Apparently, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and she wound up having to pay a taxi, $164. She called her boyfriend, who was not there. He was in another state. And then she went on this tirade on Twitter about how this guy screwed her over in the most vulnerable and important time in her life, and she took it really personally that he could not be the ferryman to deliver her unborn child to the gates of biological and physical reconstitution. And I'm not talking about reincarnation. I'm talking about like natural flavoring products or whatever, stem cells or whatever they use these unborn children for. Her attitude was completely arrogant. It was, in a lot of ways, endemic of the times that we're living in. And it was a really horrific kind of statement in a lot of ways. And the thing that really grabbed me, it's like, well, if you're in school and your boyfriend won't marry you and won't support you having a child, then why the fuck are you letting him come in you? Why? Why? Why are you letting him come in you? Because that's what happened. And there was a complete and utter disregard for this really powerful act. It's a really profound act. And look, we've all had moments of unconsciousness in that realm. Okay? But, here we are. We're at this point where, it's becoming very clear where the gaps in our awareness and development are. And this is what I think is the one thing that really isn't really talked about or addressed beyond the right to choose, beyond all these things. It's the weight of the act and the weight of the decision. And it's not nearly enough in the dialogue. So the other thing too, which is really interesting about abortions, if you look at the amount of abortions in Alabama, there's 60% black, 67%, almost 2/3 of the abortions that take place in Alabama are with black women. And, one could make a case that abortion is a form of genocide, right? And targeting a certain community. Most women who go to Planned Parenthood seem to be around that average and around that demographic, okay? So if you're really, really, really involved in human rights and equality, and you're on that train. Doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or on the right or the left. You take notice of that. You'd say, holy shit, there's something that's being perpetrated against a certain community, and maybe we need to really look at that, unless you're invested in that, in which case now you fit the bill of being a racist. Now, Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist. Everybody knows, who's done any research on Planned Parenthood, knows this. She was a eugenicist. So that's the roots of Planned Parenthood. It's eugenics. It's the elimination of a certain group of people. I don't have the answer to it. I'm just telling you the statistics and who's behind it and how it's unfolded. I would say that we as males have a real responsibility in this process. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. But there are some groups where some males, even though they may decide that they want to have some responsibility, they have no power in the situation when a woman has a right to choose. And it's just, and even when a man abdicates the responsibility, that means something too. And there's some spirit. I believe and I know this for a fact, personal experience. There is a spiritual price to pay. There is. I don't want to sit here and sound like a Sunday preacher, but I've experienced it. I have experienced the dark side of that, and it is not good. It's not. Not any place you want to be, not any place you want to dwell in. Okay? And that's just from my perspective, my experience. So anyway, we're gonna continue to talk about this, and I want to get into this idea of the goddess in a little bit. Circle back to it. Before, I needed a little bit of levity, because I gotta laugh sometimes, and so do you. So yesterday, I went into a little of a binge watch mode, and I started watching Naked and Afraid, which is an interesting show, so to speak. I mean, it's kind of weird and funny, because there are people around these people all the time with cameras. Okay, they've got a production crew that is not supposed to intervene, or just supposed to capture them. And I think after 3 or 4 days, especially if you're puking your guts out, you tend not to notice these people. And you're involved in your own kind of survival trip, most of which is probably pretty fucking boring. Most of which is probably just laying around trying not to use as many calories as you could or should, because the food sources aren't there. But it's an interesting show. Yesterday I was watching this one show. Maybe this gets into the goddess piece a little bit. I don't know. But there was this guy who was a survivalist and a teacher of survivalism. And he's like this guy, if you could create somebody who would be able to handle a situation that is extreme, you'd be one of these guys. He teaches survival to people, wilderness survival. And he was with this woman who was a hunter, and she was a pagan. She was a witch, right? And he wasn't a witch, and he wasn't a Catholic. He just wanted to survive. But what he was he was kind of arrogant in some ways. And man, I tell you, nature is the great leveler in those situations. They will bring you and your ego to your knees. So he was, kind of proud, and trying to assert his will and his way, and she was, doing her thing. And they couldn't find any food. They had a nice little spot near this waterfall, and water issue. They didn't have any problems with water, but they had problems with food. They couldn't get any food. So he found this small bird, and they ate this bird, and I don't know if they got immediately sick from this bird, but he winds up getting violently ill. But she had a problem with him, so things weren't going really well. So she made a hoop, and then she used some, sisal or twine or whatever she was able to put together there, and she made a pentagram in this hoop. And he comes back from one of his foraging journeys, and he finds that she's made this pentagram because she wants to bring good fortune and bless her camp. And the exact opposite happens. The guy gets really violently ill, goes to the hospital, has a severe case of malaria and about 2 or 3 other things. And she winds up getting to the final day of the show, and then she has to tap out because she becomes violently ill. So they both wind up becoming violently ill. Pentagram didn't help much during that experience. Just saying. I'm not denigrating the pentagram. But what was interesting is she had a lot of energy and edge toward this guy. And once she foisted that pentagram up, he was headed out of the show. So if anything, I think it amplified her antipathy, her angst, her aggression, her frustration, towards this dude. And then he was out the door shortly thereafter. And he was really in a bad way. Really in a bad way. So my sense, amplification. Amplification of the bad juju. She did it against, but the bad juju was already there. It wasn't because they found a little bird. Sometimes those signs are important, though. You have to pay attention to that. So another episode, another guy who was, really in tune, right? Super in tune. He was a martial artist. He was a shaman. A shaman. He'd spent time with his father, spent time with indigenous cultures, and went down there with this gal from Louisiana, who I really liked. She had a great attitude. But they were in this part of Maya land in Mexico that nobody could survive in. I mean, you could have like an Army Corps of Engineers down there, and they'd probably have people that would be dropping like flies in a place like this. I don't know what the producers of this show were thinking of. There are these little tiny bugs called chiquistas. They sound cute, but really they're not very cute at all. And they gave them a mosquito net. These bugs are so small, they go through the mosquito net. What are the producers on the show thinking? They know that this area is filled with these damn chiquistas. They're like small mosquitoes on steroids. They're like a cross between a mosquito and a wasp. They essentially keep stinging you. And then what they do is they have your skin sort of bubble up so that they can go back in and just feast on your kind of, bubbled up, sort of skin where the blood is much closer to the surface. It's like they puncture. They get your skin to erupt, and man, that's their feeding ground, okay? So this one girl, this young girl, she tapped out early because Mr. Shaman Man fucked up. And he's talking about the elves of the forest, and it's like, dude, I mean, if you're a shaman, that's a little lightweight, I have to say. Little lightweight. But that's his realm. That's his realm, right? That's his place. And after she taps out, now he's by himself. Same thing, same deal with the bugs, getting inside. And he found this it's called monkey fruit. And he started eating this monkey fruit. It was fermented, and he got wasted off this monkey fruit. And he was there for about 14 days, and he, Tab City. And you look at these people's legs. I mean, it's like an interesting show on some level, but I don't know. Like, you're really risking a lot. You're risking a long-term damage to your body by going into these places. And then it dawned on me. They always show like images. Oh, I got this. I got one of this, and this gets into this one episode that I saw. They always show images of the most intense and aggressive and potentially dangerous species in those environments. It could be a jaguar, it could be a leopard, it could be a snake, it could be, fill in the blank. But we're talking about kind of apex style predators, right? So in this one show, there's this kid. He'd been bitten by a shark surfing. 6-foot tiger shark bit him surfing. He was camping and he woke up to find his head in the jaws of a bear, and beat on the bear so bad that the bear let go of him. And they had pictures where he had part of his scalp and stuff torn open. He had been bitten by a rattlesnake. What are the odds of being bitten by a shark, attacked by a bear, and bitten by a rattlesnake? All right, he said it was like 649 quadrillion to 1. He's probably the only person in the history of the planet to have survived a rattlesnake bite, a bear attack, and a shark attack. Probably the only person in history. Think about that. You might get 2. Maybe you get somebody who gets attacked by a bear and bit by a rattlesnake, because sometimes those species converge. But a shark, that's the wild card right there. So you're thinking, well, shit, this guy can survive. Plus, he was a hunter, and he was wired. He could, theoretically, he could do well. He goes into the jungles of Mozambique, and just like just about everybody on the show, it's not the apex predators that get them. You know what gets them? The teensy-weensy predators. It's the ones you can't see in your water, and the ones that are flying around en masse, thinking that you're golden buffet or golden corral. It's not the apex predators. It's the microorganisms. And it is the carriers of the contagion of the microorganisms. Those are the ones that take most of these people out. That or their own stupidity. And so I was thinking, their own stupidity is going on the show in the first place. I mean, some people are actually thrive, but think of the intensity and the damage that it does to the body. It's like, wow. But almost everybody, if they survive, they've got to get past the microorganisms and the carriers of the microorganisms. And a lot of them don't. And I thought about, well, what about our society? How does this reflect on our world? Is it the apex predators that we should really be concerned about? I mean, should we be concerned about things like, the banking families, the cartels, the Illuminati? Trump just now did this thing where he's allowing troops to be on American soil. Right? Is that a version of the apex predatory system? Should we be concerned about that? Russia, China, apex predators, right? At the end of the day, that's not what will do this country in if it is done in. It is the things we cannot see. It's the things we cannot see and the carriers of the things we cannot see. So I think it's really along the lines, well, if we want to make a sort of gross generalization, look at what's happening with migration. What do we have? We got people coming into the country, and they're bringing contagion with them. Right? These people are not at the top of the food chain. They are not apex predators. If anything, they're at the theoretical bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They got no place to live. They got no place to eat. They barely have clothes on their back. Are they a threat? That's what mainstream media would like you to think, that they're no threat. If anything, they're the wretched and weary masses. And they are. But they're also the equivalent of what ultimately gets people to tap out on Naked and Afraid. It's not the apex predators. It's the things we cannot see. And that's just one version of it. A lot of times it's our interactions with other people. It's our thoughts. And it's our emotions, the things that aren't right in front of us. And if anything, perhaps the apex predators have set these things in motion so they themselves don't have to do the dirty work. And in a lot of ways, we become, our own worst threat by the associations we make, the people that we hang out with, the thoughts that we have, the emotions that we bury whatever they are. And some people could say that there's even a viral effect on that. That, what's ever in our guts or what's in our bloodstream can also affect these thoughts and these feelings. Hence, I think this deep need for people to detoxify and cleanse, and I think it's a good thing. And I've seen a lot of people really religiously go after it because they're going after the stuff inside of us because, well, physically we'll feel better, but it's that stuff inside of us which can at times control our thoughts, control what we put in our bodies, control how we relate to other people, and how we allow certain models of relating to infiltrate our lives. And so the next thing you know, we're struggling. We've let people in, or we've let thoughts in, or we've let emotions in, and now we've got the threat at the gates. It's behind the gates. It's inside of us. And I think a lot of it has to do with us, to be quite honest with you. And in order to understand this, you've got to, be in a place where you're sort of free of a lot of that stuff, or clear of it, so that you can begin to look at what's going on around us. And that's not always pretty, and it's not always easy. And sometimes we have things we have to go through, and disentangling or trying to make a declaration or an affirmation of what's inside of us will piss some people off. They may not like it, and it's the way it is. And the process of evolution doesn't mean spiritual evolution. Awakening does not always mean that you're going to be liked all the way along the way. I mean, if you want to look at a model, I could give you the Abrahamic model. Sananda Manuel, he wasn't always liked. And what about Confucius? He's not an Abrahamic model. He pissed people off because he was telling these people who were hiring him ostensibly to be better rulers, he was telling them the truth, and they didn't want to hear that. So sometimes it's not always a pleasant, easygoing, kumbaya experience. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, getting back to the topic at hand. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about the abortion issue from the perspective of people who are into the goddess. Okay? The goddess. So it's an interesting question. Like, what does the goddess mean to you? Who is the goddess? Some people will say, well, the goddess is this great feminine aspect. It's Sophia, it's Isis, it's Mary, it's Mother Mary, it's the compendium of this divine feminine. Okay, so I decided to look up what the definition of the goddess is. And I went over to, not always a trusted source, but I went to Wikipedia to look up the definition of the goddess. Believe it or not, there is not a lot of information on the goddess. No, I take that back. Some, but you would think there would be more. All right, let me read this to you. A goddess is a female deity. Goddesses have been linked with virtues such as beauty, love, motherhood, and fertility. Mother goddess cult in prehistoric times. They have also been associated with ideas such as war, creation, and death. Okay, that takes a back seat to the ones that I mentioned: beauty, love, mother. When I say goddess, I'd say probably it evokes a very positive, feminine virtue: love, creation, nurturing. In some faiths, the sacred female figure holds a central place in religious prayer and worship. I mean, look at Isis. When we see Isis, what do we see? We see the image of this mother suckling her young god-to-be, right? Okay. So, for example, Shakastism, the worship of the female force that animates the world, is one of the three major sects of Hinduism. The primacy or monotheistic or near-monotheistic great goddess is advocated by some modern matriarchists as a female version of, preceding, or analog to the Abrahamic god, associated with the historical rise of monotheism, the Mediterranean Axis age. Polytheist religions including polytheistic reconstructionists, honor multiple gods and goddesses and usually view them as discrete, separate beings. These deities may be a part of a pantheon, or different regions may have tutelary deities. The noun goddess is secondary formation, combining the Germanic god with the Latinate s suffix. It first appeared in Middle English about 1350. The English word follows the linguistic precedent of a number of languages, including Egyptian, classical Greece, and several Semitic languages that add a feminine ending to the language's word for God. Joseph Campbell in The Power of Myth, 1980 interview with Bill Moyers, links the image of the earth or mother goddess to symbols of fertility and reproduction. For example, Campbell states that there have been systems of religion where the mother is the prime parent, the source. We talk of Mother Earth, and in Egypt you have the Mother Heavens, the goddess Nut, who is represented as the whole heavenly sphere. Campbell continues by stating that the correlation between fertility and the goddess found its roots in agriculture. And then it goes on to list a number of goddesses. Cybele, Hebat, Araniti, Leto. Who else do we have? Pre-Islamic Arabia, there's a whole section on that. From India, we have Varuni, Agnya, Prathiva, Ushas, Iranian, which I believe is Zoroastrian, Anahita, or Anahit, Dana, Spenta, Armayati, Artemis, Aphrodite, Athena, Dione, Eris, Gaia, Hecate, Hera, Hestia, Iris, Nike, Selene, and the long list of goddesses. Pachamama, Inca, the Supreme Mother Earth, Mama Kila, moon goddess. So I'm thinking about this whole idea around the goddess. And if you are somebody, I'm just throwing this out there because moon is in Sagittarius. If you are somebody who is a goddess worshiper, somebody who believes in the goddess, I believe in the feminine aspect of God. We have the Father, Mother God, right? Creation principle, two, right? Not just one independent of the other, which is imbalanced, in my opinion. But if you're a firm believer in the goddess and the principle of fertility and creation and beauty and love, and you're a goddess worshiper, is that not at odds with the taking of life? Are you in violation of your own spiritual precepts? You could be a man. You don't have to be a woman. You could be a man. Now you could bifurcate that and say, well, look at Kali. Kali's a goddess, and what does Kali do, right? Kali harvests souls. So is abortion an invocation of Kali, or a dark goddess? And if that's the case, and you are involved in goddess worship, or you venerate the goddess, do you then venerate Kali as well? And that it's all part of this, not just the triple-headed goddess, but maybe quadruple. I'm just throwing this out there because I've noticed that there are a number of people and women who claim to be goddess worshippers. And then they turn around and they become pro-choice. And I'm just wondering how that's squared up in some ways. Like you would think that if you were a goddess worshiper, because of what the goddess stands for, that you would be pro-life. Because that would be venerating the mother and allowing the mother to have its ultimate consecration and manifestation into your life. And maybe the two aren't mutually exclusive. It was just something that I was thinking about, this goddess paradox. Because I do believe I've seen people who would be straight up goddess worshippers. And they would have no problem. And then they'll flip the script. And then they'll come out from this kind of pro-choice perspective. But isn't that a desecration of the goddess? And I'm not even talking about God or the West or the Abrahamic thing. I'm talking about something that's much more earth-based, nature-based, animated, pagan, if you want to throw that in there. It's just a question. I don't have an answer for it, but I just thought I'd bring that up. the goddess paradox. What do you guys think about that? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? I'm always happy to know. There's always duality and density, 3D, male, female, light, dark, one can one only, the other side. Does this apparent dichotomy merge as one? Yes, I agree. I think that God is both aspects, divine male, divine feminine. I agree. I agree. I see the goddess as the feminine aspect of God. Right. I agree. I think they're together. Shadow work is not for sissies. Go glow stick Moloch. Charles Mazak, come out from among them, separate us from at the Lord. That show ain't right. The producers making it possible to get mud. Yeah, I agree. I think that naked and afraid. Those people don't have a fighting chance most of the time. And I think in a lot of ways it's kind of exploitative. All right, what else do we have? Sharks, rattlesnakes, we have, dude. Sharks, rattlesnakes. Kali just means time. Time is the ultimate destroyer. That's true. I think it's definition of what life is that differs here. Okay, sure. Well, exactly. I guess we can run around with the definition of life. Are we all going to agree on the definition of life? No, we're not. We're not going to agree on the definition of life. So we can play fast, and some people will, and some people won't. If you're a goddess worshiper, what is your definition of life? Where does it come from? If you're a goddess worshiper, aren't all things animate? Isn't everything animate? And if that's the case, isn't the spark of life, this life growing inside of you, isn't that animate too? Because in that world, everything is alive. So what is not alive? Right? Is it when you disassociate part of your own biology? Is your biology not alive? Are your internal organs not alive? Or do they only become alive and living and life affirming when a person decrees it so, based on their choice? Because if we're living in an animate universe, in an animate world, everything is alive. Everything. Including the so-called life form that's inside of you. Theoretically, if it's an animate universe. If not everything is alive, then we make choices. But what is the definition of that? At what point does it switch on? Is it because of your conscious awareness? By giving your awareness, doesn't it become alive? Or did that thing exist and was a living life form before that? I'm just throwing this out there because it's a paradox. It's a paradox in the goddess world, at least as I see it. And it's things to think about, talk about. At the end of the day, look, it's your life. You can do whatever you want. Okay, you can do whatever you want.